Mr. President, early yesterday morning, I returned from a whirlwind trip to the Middle East as part of a bipartisan CODEL, or congressional delegation, to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. The trip was a direct response to Hamas's savage attack on Israel. The CODEL, led by my friend Senator Lindsey Graham, brought together 10 senators from both parties to show the United States support for Israel and to demonstrate U.S. commitment to protecting our now threatened national interest in the region. Our message was united. The United States stands with Israel. Iran is on notice, and it must stand down. And we need to get hostages freed and Americans out of harm's way. We are committed to seeing Hamas defeated so that a new chapter of prosperity for Israel and its Arab neighbors can begin, of which normalized relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia would be a keystone. Our engagements on the ground included frank and candid discussions with heads of state, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and our U.S. Embassy teams on the ground. Our day in Tel Aviv began with meeting the families of hostages being held in Gaza, including Americans who shared their painful stories. As a parent and a grandparent, it is heartbreaking to see and hear the grief of these family members. Later that day, we met with Israeli defense officials for an update on the war. We were shown video evidence of the unnerving atrocities committed by Hamas terrorists, horrific images that I will not soon forget. Mr. President, our meetings made clear the absolute imperative to see Hamas defeated. Hamas' attacks has been likened to Israel's own September 11th. But Prime Minister Netanyahu made a point that is especially chilling for Americans, but that every critic of Israel must hear. He pointed out that on 9/11, our enemy was thousands of miles away. In Israel, their enemy is only a kilometer away. Mr. President, for more than 15 years, Israel's had to live every day with a terrorist organization on its border, whose sole mission in life is to kill Jews and to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And during that time, Hamas has loomed as a persistent threat to Israel, attacking, kidnapping, and killing Israelis. But the barbarism and brutality Hamas displayed in its October 7th attacks took its evil to new heights. And now Israel knows what it has to do. It has to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. For the Israelis, this is existential. Israel's cause is just, and its resolve is firm. And it should have every peace-loving nation in the world on its side. Now, how Israel goes about that mission matters. And it needs to be done in a way that minimizes civilian casualties. The Palestinians living in Gaza are also victims of Hamas's reign of terror. Hamas has made it clear that the only value it places on the lives of Palestinians is to use them as fodder to direct attention away from its atrocities and to try and turn public sentiment, especially in Western media and the Arab street, against Israel. Case in point, Hamas's disproven claim that Israel struck a hospital, which sparked protests and riots in a number of countries. Israelis know that there are innocent Palestinians trapped in this fight and that civilian casualties and a humanitarian crisis could drive more Palestinians toward extremism. That's why Israel is taking measures to protect innocents in Gaza, although its efforts are being undermined by Hamas, which has discouraged Palestinians from complying with Israel's evacuation order. The U.S. and other peace-loving nations in the region and beyond need to give Israel space to take the fight to and eradicate Hamas. Because if Hamas and its reign of terror is allowed to continue, no nation in the region or beyond will be able to live in peace and security. Mr. President, it really is that simple. And one final but important point. Hamas might claim to represent Palestinians, but its violent actions do nothing to benefit the Palestinian people. The only people who benefit from this brutal bloodshed are the Ayatollahs in Iran, whose goal is to bring chaos, violence, and death to all who don't share their extreme and militant religious ideology, which, I might add, includes wiping Israel off the face of the earth. Look no further than Hamas if you want to see Iran's influence. 90% of their military budget comes from Iran. Or Hezbollah, the terrorist organization on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, which is also armed and financed by Iran. Then there are the Houthis in Yemen, who in the aftermath of October 7th fired missiles and drones headed for Israel, again likely at the direction of Iran. The Shia militias, who are attacking American soldiers in Iraq and Syria. The killing by Russians of innocent civilians in Ukraine with drones supplied by Iran. Through its proxies, Iran is literally getting away with murder. To the Iranian regime, we say, we're on to you. In addition to working with regional partners to get American hostages and citizens out of Gaza, the Biden administration must clearly articulate to the Iranians that if they do not stand down, or if they greenlight the escalation of this war, the United States and our allies will be forced to respond forcefully. The movement of U.S. firepower to the region should make that point very clear to Tehran. Mr. President, the attacks on October the 7th represent a kind of evil that the world hasn't seen in generations. And it must be confronted and contained. If it's not, we could see death and destruction on a scale akin to the horrors of the last century. History is watching. Mr. President, I yield the floor.